Good afternoon. Many thanks for the invitation, and many thanks also for accepting to focus on this important topic, I think, at least. So, rightly, my presentation focuses on the constitutionalization trend of the European human rights justice, and especially the European Court of Human Rights, through the lens of the triple influence exerted by private interest groups on the European Court of Human Rights. Here I define constitutionalization like a professional and permanent jurisdiction composed of permanent judges. For the European Court of Human Rights, it was in 1998. Second criteria of definition, the way the ECHR can filter the application brought before them and set up and apply a priority human rights policy that sets up a hierarchy of rights. For instance, we know that the right to life, under Article 2 of the ECHR, the right to dignity, the right to liberty, and also the right to get domestic remedy are dealt with by the ECHR in priority. Third criteria of definition, the power of ECHR to deliver landmark judgments, notably under Article 46 of the rules of the ECHR, that implies general measures to be ordered and to be requested on member states. Also, fourth and last criteria is the power of the ECHR to impose obligations on states through such landmark judgment. While most of legal scholars agree on the process of constitutionalization of the ECHR that tends to evolve toward the Supreme Court, some scholars evoke quite similar trend that the US Supreme Court. Explanations brought by such legal scholars about such constitutionalization trend tends to ignore the influence exerted by NGOs and private foundations. I think such private influence on the ECHR has been indeed neglected and by scholars who have more paid attention on technical reforms of the ECHR. This is, for instance, the case of Sadurski, but without scrutinizing the role played by these private actors. Conversely, the scholars who have studied the influence exerted by NGOs on international courts through their litigation activities, like Sikowski, Hodgson, Sundstrom, and Haddad, have neglected participation of NGOs in the committees of reforms dealing with change to the architecture of the ECHR. And this is particularly the case of the Strasbourg Court that has been under significant reform since it has become a permanent court. This scant academic attention constitutes for me a paradox, since the reforms of the courts tend to impact litigation efforts and activities undertaken by NGO, notably through filtering, landmark judgment, and execution of this judgment. Here, in the paper, I assume advocacy and litigation efforts combined with growing private participation in reform of the ECHR could reinforce this constitutionalization trend, and its current design particularly fits with litigation undertaken by liberal NGOs. Here I refer to liberal NGOs, but we could discuss about this definition later on. Even tough, I think there are several criteria to define liberal NGOs and private foundations. First, their extensive collaboration among the resource-providing elites, since most of their funds are channeled through private foundations grants. Their funding, which comes mainly from foundations, which can be called middle-of-the-road, mainline or liberal foundation, and which are clearly non-conservative ones. Third criteria, an activity centered around the claims of individuals demanding recognition of the legitimacy of their distinct property, and in particularly minority. And last criteria, an outlook which is directed toward the idea of cosmopolitan citizenship, rather than the reinforcement of the role of the nation states where the NGO's action takes place, thus participating to a globalist approach. First, I will scrutinize the pilot judgment procedure that was developed and under the influence of a specific liberal NGO. And second and last, I will examine the participation of NGOs in the committees in charge of the reforms of the ECHR. But I couldn't do that without presenting my method. I just investigating and scrutinizing the main documents issued, internal documents issued by both the ECHR, the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe, but also some internal documents released and issued by NGOs and private foundations. So first, the influence on pilot judgment procedure. More generally, the main liberal private foundations, such as Open Society, Ford, MacArthur, Oak Foundations, and the Sigrid Rosing Trust in particular, and some of the NGOs they finance, among which ISHRAC, based in London, conduct research on several aspects of the constitutionalization of the European human rights judicial system, with a view to reinforcing their influence on the reforms of that system. Among these researches stands one recent research on the ECHR pilot judgment procedure conducted by ISHRAC, so the European Human Rights Advocacy Center, that is mainly financed by Open Society, MacArthur, the Rosing Trust, and the Oak Foundation. Sorry, I have to, sorry. ISHRAC has notably informed and assisted the ECHR in developing and codifying standards relating to the use of the ECHR pilot judgment procedure. And the ECHR itself has requested ISHRAC to conduct a research on the evaluation of this new pilot judgment procedure that was set up in 2004. Upon completion of their research, Philip Leach's team, that was the head of ISHRAC at that time, disseminated their findings at a collaborative seminar hosted at the ECHR in Strasbourg in June 2010. Participants included ECHR judges Lech Garlicki and François Stuckens, Registrar Eric Friedberg, Michael O'Boyle, and head of the Department for Execution of Judgments, Geneviève Meyer in particular, as well as government representatives. Directly inspired by the ISHRAC research, the court announced in March 2011 the introduction of a new rule, Rule 61 of the Rule Courts, to clarify, codify, and reinforce the use of the pilot judgment proceeding. In particular, under the influence of ISHRAC, the new Rule 61 posits that any application, quotation, any application selected for pilot judgment treatment shall be processed as a matter of priority in accordance with Rule 41 of the Rule of the Court. The Court shall, in its pilot judgment, identify both the nature of the structural or systemic problem or other dysfunction as established, as well as the type of remedial measure with the contracting state concerned it's required to take at the domestic level by virtue of the operative positions of the judgment. In addition to these specific provisions that allow the court to request specific measures upon the condemned states, the specific proceeding also favors a process of constitutionalization, as pilot judgment required to select, collect, and gather many cases of the same nature and to lodge them with the court in an appropriate way. And this ability of collecting complaints belongs not to individuals, but to NGOs that are repetitive players before the ECHR. Reciprocally, the ECHR is now more dependent on the technical quality of the complaints lodged before it, and therefore on NGO, as good technical quality facilitates the selection of cases on which to render pilot judgments. In this respect, NGOs' lobbying and litigation activities go a long way to render credible the claims of barristers and representatives of NGOs that European judges would hint on a regular basis to NGOs and private foundations that their case would be welcome on the basis of pilot judgments. And regarding, in particularly, the execution of these pilot judgments that are specific, they are under a specific proceeding, since their execution has to be supervised and monitored by the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe. Action plans and report plans have to be issued and submitted by the states who have been condemned in this pilot judgment procedure. And the NGOs, since 2006, can submit some comments to the Committee of Ministers regarding the issues of application of this kind of judgments. So specifically in case of violation of obligation committed by the states. Second aspect of the lobby and advocacy efforts oriented toward the committee in charge of the reform of the ECHR. And here we have to take back to first the ISMIR conference, the Brighton conference also, and with some observation that first some private foundations along with significant NGOs have been invited in this process of reform. This is the case of the Open Society Justice Initiative along with ISHRAC, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and so forth. And thanks to advocacy efforts, these private actors have contributed to the official discussion on the redesign and reform of the Strasbourg Court. For instance, just to give you a significant example, AIR relayed the proposals made by the Open Society Justice Initiative, which consisted in backing the ECHR with money and staff and reinforcing the effectiveness of the execution of its judgments against non-compliant states. According to Open Society Justice Initiative, the ECHR should provide more public and detailed guidance to states on implementation, and in certain cases, these states should be fined for non-compliance. Certain proposals submitted by AIR were integrated into the final report on the longer term of the ECHR system, such as reinforced supervision of the execution and implementation of judgment. After so there was also the Brussels conference. Just a second. The Brussels conference regarding execution and implementation of ECHR judgments. The purpose of the conference was to adopt a political declaration and an action plan for the reform process that began in 2010 with the Interlaken, Izmir, and Brighton Declaration, while emphasize both the shared responsibility for implementation of the ECHR and the execution of the judgments of the ECHR. The NGO statements that were also invited put forward 10 action plans, including what kind of measures states should enact to improve their judgment execution process, what information they should transmit to the Committee of Ministers in a year's time, and the way the Committee of Ministers should publicly report on what specific measures have been adopted to increase the transparency of its working method and the resource of the department and the execution of judgments. The NGOs also promoted a more methodical and active follow-up on judgments related to systemic widespread or gross human rights violation, removal of the invitation to the ECHR to maintain its vigilance with regard to respect for the margin of appreciation, and explicit acknowledgement of the role of civil society in the implementation of convention rights, in the execution of ECHR judgments, and in supporting the efforts of states parties to better embed convention rights at the national level. After the Brussels Declaration, After the Brussels Declaration, the NGOs advocated for more precise guidance as to the circumstances in which Article 46, which set up an infringement proceeding, could be used with more cooperation with NGOs, and for the development of graduated measures to be applied when a state refuses to abide by ECHR judgments. The influence and the claim by such NGOs were integrated into the declaration, at least partly. Finally, the Copenhagen Declaration, in which the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe and the NGOs, in a joint statement, both denounced the draft declaration that gives more room to the national margin of appreciation, and in particularly the principle of subsidiarity enjoyed by national states and some limitation on the ECHR jurisdiction, which, according to them, threatens the universality of the rights protected by ECHR, the independence of the ECHR and its freedom from political influence, the very broad scope of ECHR jurisdiction concerning interpretation and application of the ECHR, and finally, the unconditional obligation of state parties to implement the ECHR judgments. Instead, the NGOs argues for the need to respect and preserve the independence of the ECHR. ECHR supervision of effective human rights protection at the national level, the enhancements of the role played by civil society in implementing the ECHR at the national level, the Court's authority to review human rights cases concerning asylum, immigration, and cases arising from international conflicts, and lastly, preservation of the Court from the influence of national states, better execution of judgments, and strengthening of national processes for the selection and election of European court judges. I think this is laughable. A tension, therefore, exists between the claims by NGOs for an independent European court and their own embeddedness in the court. More particularly, the monitoring of the implementation of judgments is part of broader efforts made, for instance, by the Open Society Justice Initiative to improve the effectiveness of the ECHR through influence on the nomination of judges and the adoption of procedures, and to increase the impact of its own strategic litigation. Just to conclude, could we speak about liberal framing of the ECHR through a specific constitutionalism trend here? And could constitutionalism be seen as a result of advocacy and litigation efforts made by liberal NGOs and private foundations? Third question, liberal NGOs and private foundations as moral entrepreneur of liberal constitutionalization of the ECHR? And fourth question, or fourth issue that arises for me, is the relationship between constitutionalization and the constitutionalism evoked and criticized by Luklin in his last book, Against Constitutionalism. Many thanks.